There's a moment in every life when silence becomes louder than words, a moment when your absence speaks more than your presence ever could, and sometimes walking away without a word, without an explanation, without turning back, that becomes the loudest scream of all, not out of pride, not out of revenge, but because your soul got tired of begging to be seen, to be understood, to be respected. You left and they thought it was a game. They thought you were bluffing. They thought you'd crawl back like before, but you didn't. You left without a word. And now that silence, it haunts them. It echoes in the places they once ignored you. It lingers in the spaces where they once took you for granted. You were the light, and now they're stuck in the dark. So today, I want to talk to the people who walked away silently, who didn't make a scene, who didn't beg to be heard one last time. You just disappeared, and your absence is now the loudest presence in their life. They took your peace for granted. Now their mind is at war. There was a time when you gave them the most precious thing you had, your peace. You brought calm into chaos. You brought love into cold places. You smiled when you were hurting. You encouraged them when no one was encouraging you. You were the calm in their storm. But the tragedy is, they never saw the value of your peace until they lost it. They took it like it was always going to be there. They played with your silence. They mocked your kindness. They thought your patience was weakness. But now your absence is loud. Now their mind is racing at night. Now their heart feels restless because the one who used to soothe it is gone. You see, you didn't leave with revenge in your heart. You left with wounds they'll never understand. You left because you finally realized you were bleeding emotionally for people who wouldn't even offer a bandage. And when you walked out, without yelling, without fighting, without blaming, that's when it hit them. That's when they realized the quietest exits are the ones that echo forever. They try to distract themselves now, new faces, new voices, new environments. But nothing fills the silence you left behind, because your peace was rare. Your presence was healing. You didn't need to scream. Your absence is screaming for you. There's a war in their mind now, and it wasn't caused by anger. It was caused by regret. Regret that they didn't appreciate you when you were still trying. Regret that they confused your silence for indifference. Regret that they never realized you were the only thing keeping them from falling apart. And here's the truth. Some people don't realize they're in the presence of an angel until the angel leaves. Some people don't recognize the medicine in your soul until the sickness in their own heart becomes unbearable. And now they're haunted, not by ghosts, not by memories, but by the version of you that loved them unconditionally and finally stopped. You brought peace and they turned it into pain. But don't regret your love. Don't regret your loyalty. Don't regret your silence, because your silence was the first step in reclaiming your power. They lost your peace and now their soul is restless. And that, my friend, is something they'll never outrun. You didn't leave to hurt them. You left to save yourself. There comes a breaking point. A moment where your soul whispers something that your heart tried to ignore for far too long. It says, enough, not because you stopped loving them, not because you stopped caring, but because you finally realized loving them was killing you. You weren't being dramatic. You weren't giving up. You were finally choosing yourself. And sometimes the most powerful act of self-love is walking away without saying a word. You didn't need to make a grand speech. You didn't need to cry and beg and explain your worth. You'd done that before, and it broke you every time. You didn't leave to teach them a lesson. You didn't leave so they would feel pain. You left because staying any longer would have destroyed you. Piece by piece, you were being erased. Your voice was getting quieter. Your light was dimming. And your love, that deep, fierce, loyal love you gave so freely, was being thrown back at you like it didn't matter. You gave your best, and it still wasn't enough for people who didn't even know what they were holding. So you let go, silently, painfully, courageously. And now they feel it. They may not say it out loud. Their pride won't let them. But deep down, they feel your absence like a wound that won't stop bleeding. They feel the weight of everything they ignored. The late-night messages you once sent, gone. The way you checked in when they were silent, gone. The loyalty you gave when they least deserved it, gone. You didn't make a scene, but your exit left a scar. Sometimes the most haunting thing isn't someone shouting at you. It's someone going silent. It's someone who used to give you everything, giving you nothing. And now they sit there replaying every moment, every chance they had to choose you, and didn't. You left and they thought they'd move on quick. They thought replacements would ease the sting. But you were never meant to be replaced because your love wasn't ordinary. You were the one who saw their brokenness and stayed anyway. You were the one who loved them deeper than they loved themselves. You were their safe place, and now they have nowhere to hide. But here's the beautiful truth. You didn't lose them, they lost you. And you didn't walk away because you were weak. You walked away because you were finally strong enough to stop setting yourself on fire to keep other people warm. You finally chose peace over chaos. You finally realized that staying in a place that starves your soul is not love, it's slow death. And you chose life, you chose healing, you chose you. So if they're haunted now, it's not because you hurt them. It's because they finally realized what they had and what they'll never get back. And that's not on you. That's the price of taking a good heart for granted. You didn't leave to break them. You left to stop breaking yourself. And that, my friend, is the kind of strength they never saw coming, that they never thought you'd leave until you did people get comfortable. They think because you forgave them once, you'll keep forgiving them forever. They mistake your silence for weakness, for permission, your patience for passivity. They take and take and take, assuming you'll always stay. They build their pride on the illusion that you'll never walk away because you never made threats. You never gave ultimatums. You just loved, consistently, quietly, deeply. You gave them chance after chance, believing they would change, believing they would grow, believing they would see you for who you truly were. But the problem is, when people don't value your presence, they'll only recognize it after your absence. They didn't think you'd leave. Not you. Not the one who always stayed after the arguments. Not the one who wiped their tears even when they were the reason you cried. Not the one who showed up, broken, exhausted, hurting, but still showed up. But you did. You finally did. And not with fireworks. Not with doors slamming. Just silence. And that silence became deafening. Because you see, when someone never expects you to leave, your absence hits like an earthquake. It shatters the illusion they built around your loyalty. It breaks their pride into a million pieces. They start replaying the past like a movie in their head. Every ignored text, every time they dismissed your pain, every time they thought you'd never walk. And suddenly, they realize too late that you were never theirs to control. You were a gift they misused. A blessing they never believed would walk away. Now they look for you in everyone. They try to find traces of your soul in strangers, but no one matches your heart. No one listens like you did. No one holds space for them like you did. And the worst part, they know they did this. They know it was their hands that let you slip away. Not because you stopped loving them, but because they never truly loved you back the way you deserve. You walked away because you finally saw the truth. Love is not supposed to hurt like that. It's not supposed to leave you empty, questioning your worth, begging for breadcrumbs. You realized that staying wasn't loyalty, it was self-abandonment. And so you chose yourself, quietly, without drama, without one final goodbye, and that's what haunts them. Not just that you're gone, but that you were strong enough to leave without needing to be seen. You see, people fear two things, being alone and being forgotten. And in you, they lost both their comfort and their conscience. Because your silence speaks now louder than your words ever did. Every day they wake up without you is a reminder of what they lost. A reminder that love, once taken for granted, doesn't always come back. So let them wonder. Let them sit in the silence they created. Let them learn that not everyone stays forever. That even the most loyal hearts can get tired. That even the ones who never imagined leaving eventually do. And when they do, it's not out of bitterness. It's out of truth. The truth that enough is enough, that even the strongest hearts deserve to rest, that even you with all your love and forgiveness needed to save yourself. And now they're left with echoes of a voice that once called them home, echoes of footsteps that once ran toward them in love, now walking away in peace. They never thought you'd leave until you did, and that is what keeps them up at night. Your silence exposed everything they tried to hide. Silence isn't just the absence of words, it's the presence of truth. And when you went silent, everything they were hiding got exposed. Because your silence wasn't empty, it was full of the pain you were too tired to explain. Full of the disappointment you were too exhausted to voice. Full of the realizations that didn't need to be shouted. because your absence screamed them louder than your voice ever could. See, when you stopped defending yourself, their lies had nowhere to hide. When you stopped trying to be understood, the games they played fell apart. When you stopped explaining your worth, the truth came crashing down on them. They couldn't hide behind your love anymore. They couldn't mask their guilt behind your forgiveness. Because you left, not just physically, but emotionally, spiritually. You disconnected from the cycle. You broke the pattern. You chose silence, and it exposed their soul. Your silence held up a mirror, and they didn't like what they saw. They saw the way they dismissed you. They saw how they manipulated your kindness. They saw how they were only strong when you were weak. And now, with you gone, they feel naked, vulnerable, lost. Because you were the cover that made them look better than they really were. You were the light that kept their darkness from showing. But now your silence has illuminated everything. It exposed their selfishness, the way they made everything about them, even when you were the one hurting. It exposed their emotional immaturity, how they ran from hard conversations, how they avoided responsibility, how they blamed you for their own brokenness. It exposed their fear. Fear of losing control, fear of real intimacy, fear of being truly seen. You were the one person who loved them past their masks, and they still chose to wear them. Now there's no one left to pretend for. That's what haunts them. Not just that you're gone, but that now they can't hide from themselves. Because when you left without a word, it didn't give them closure. It gave them a mirror. And in that mirror, they saw the damage they caused. Not the version they told their friends. Not the excuses they made in their head. But the raw truth. They had someone real, and they broke them. They thought they had time. They thought you'd always be there to clean up the mess, to explain things, to try harder. But you didn't. You went silent, and that silence held them accountable in a way no confrontation ever could. Because there's nothing more terrifying than losing someone who loved you deeply, and knowing it was your fault. So now, every time they remember you, it stings. Not because you were cruel, but because you were kind. Not because you screamed, but because you didn't have to. You left quietly, and your absence shouted the truth, that they had a good thing, that they lost it, and that you saw through them even when you were loving them. And now they sit in that silence, trying to distract themselves, trying to convince themselves that you'll come back. But deep down, they know that kind of love doesn't return to the place that broke it. That kind of silence only comes when someone has finally found peace, without needing to be heard. You didn't need revenge. You didn't need closure. You became your own healing. And in your silence, they heard everything. They laughed when you were weak, but now they're crying without you. There was a time when your tears didn't matter to them, when your pain was entertainment, when your vulnerability was treated like a joke. They saw you break down, and instead of lifting you up, they stepped over you. They laughed behind your back, smirked at your loyalty, mocked the fact that you kept showing up with love, even when they handed you silence, disrespect, and emotional wounds in return. You were weak in their eyes. You were too sensitive, too available, too forgiving. But the thing they didn't know is this: you weren't weak. You were powerful. Because it takes unmatched strength to keep giving love in a place that keeps trying to kill it. They laughed when you tried. They dismissed your efforts. They rolled their eyes at your apologies. They grew arrogant on the fact that you wouldn't leave. They thought your heart was a doormat and your soul just background noise to their ego. But now, that same laugh is turned into silence. That smirk into regret. That pride into pain. Because the one they called a too emotional is the one they can't forget. The one they saw as a too soft is now the storm they can't escape. You left without a word, and now they're crying behind closed doors, pretending they're fine while their heart replays the way you used to love them. Deeply, fearlessly, faithfully. You see, people only laugh at your weakness when they know deep down they could never love like you. That's why they make fun of it. It's a mask for their insecurity. You had the courage to stay soft in a world that hardened them. You had the grace to forgive again and again, even when you were breaking inside. And when you finally left, that silence reminded them that your weakness was actually strength they'll never understand. Now they cry for the things they laughed at. They miss the text messages you used to send when they were going through it. They miss the way you showed up even when you were tired. They miss the way you always made space for them even when they gave you nothing. And they realized far too late that you weren't weak. You were rare. You were the one who stayed while they pushed. You were the one who listened while they ignored. You were the one who believed in their potential when even they didn't. You cried, and they turned away. But now the roles have reversed. They're crying now, but no one's there to hold them. They're breaking, but you've already healed. Because you made peace with your pain, you turned it into power. You didn't need to scream. Your growth became your revenge. And don't you dare feel guilty for walking away. Don't you dare feel bad for choosing peace. Because the truth is, you gave them every chance. You gave them your time, your loyalty, your love. And they gave you silence, pride, and betrayal. So you left. And now the very thing they laughed at has become the one thing they'll never have again. You Cole, let them cry, let them regret, let them feel the weight of what they threw away, not out of bitterness, not out of revenge, but because sometimes pain is the only teacher left when love is gone. They laughed when you were weak, but now they weep, because you had the kind of strength they'll spend a lifetime searching for and never find again. You were the light. Now they're lost in the dark. There was a time when your presence made the whole room feel brighter. You didn't have to try. Your spirit just carried that kind of warmth, that light that made broken people feel whole again. You were their safe space, the calm in their chaos, the quiet comfort they didn't even know they needed until you were gone. You brought light not just through your words, but through your consistency, your loyalty, your willingness to show up even when your own heart was bleeding. You carried people who wouldn't even lift a hand to help you stand. And you did it without needing recognition, without needing applause. You were the light, and they didn't see it. They were so used to you being there that they stopped noticing. They took your light for granted, like the sun, always rising, always shining, always available. They thought you'd never stop. They thought you'd never grow tired. But light gets tired too. Especially when it shines in rooms full of shadows that never want to heal. You kept giving and giving until you had nothing left. And when you finally walked away, silently, peacefully, without explanation, they were forced to sit in the very darkness you used to protect them from. Now they're lost, not just confused, spiritually lost, emotionally disoriented. Their soul doesn't feel safe anymore. Not because something bad happened, but because something good left. Something rare, something sacred. You were the light they never acknowledged. And now they're stumbling in a life that feels empty, colorless, cold. They reach for comfort, but nothing compares to how your presence used to feel. They try to laugh, but the joy feels hollow. Because it was never about what you said. It was about who you were. You never needed the spotlight. You were the light. You walked in and hearts softened. You spoke and pain got quieter. You touched people's lives in ways they still don't fully understand. And that's why your absence hits like a spiritual vacuum. Because light doesn't just disappear, it leaves a void, and that void, they feel it now, in every corner of their life, in the silence that wraps around them at night, in the emptiness that no new connection can fill. Because you were one of one, the kind of soul that doesn't come back around twice, you left not to punish them, but to protect your light. You realized that if you stayed, you'd start to burn out. You saw that the people who were basking in your glow had no intention of giving anything back. And so you made the hardest choice to walk away and reclaim your energy. And now they finally understand. Too late, but they understand that your love was not ordinary, that your light was not replaceable, that you were not just another chapter in their life. You were the part of the story that made sense of everything else. Now they sit in that darkness, not just lonely, but longing for a warmth that only your spirit carried, longing for a light that only your presence could bring. And that longing, it haunts them, because you weren't just someone they lost. You were the very thing they didn't know they needed until it was gone. You were their lighthouse, and now all they see is fog. Let them miss you. Let them feel what life looks like without your radiance. You didn't walk away in anger. You walked away in love. Love for yourself, love for your future, love for the light you were no longer willing to dim. You were the light. And now they're lost in the dark, praying for a sunrise that no longer comes. They thought you needed them, but now they realize they needed you. The most humbling moment in a person's life is when they realize they weren't the gift. They were receiving it. They thought you needed them. That you were the one desperate for connection, desperate for validation, desperate for their time, their love, their attention. They believed they had the upper hand, They thought you were the one lucky to be in their life. But now they sit in silence, realizing they got it all backwards. It wasn't you who needed them. It was them who needed you. You see, when your heart is pure and your love is unconditional, people often mistake that as dependence. But they forget. It takes strength to love like that. It takes courage to keep showing up for people who don't know how to receive love. You weren't weak. You were a warrior of grace. You gave, and not once did you keep count. Not once did you throw it in their face. You loved them at their worst, and in return, they acted like they were doing you a favor. They believed you stayed because you couldn't leave, but now they know. You stayed because your love was real. And now that you're gone, the truth hits them like a storm. They thought you needed their validation, but now they're the ones scrolling through old texts, searching for your voice in old voicemails, checking their phone for a message that will never come. They thought you were clingy, but now they realize you were consistent. They thought you were emotional, but now they realize you were honest. They thought you were replaceable. But now they see how empty the world feels without your presence. It's easy for people to think they're the prize when they're the ones being chased. But the real power lies in the one who can walk away. Silently, fully, finally. You left without revenge. You left with clarity. You left with dignity. And now they understand what real value looks like. You weren't just someone in their life. You were the soul that held them together when they didn't even know they were falling apart. You were the reminder of what genuine love feels like. Love without conditions, without manipulation, without fear. And the worst part, they can't fake what you gave. They can't recreate your energy. They can't replace the way your spirit made them feel, so they try to distract themselves. New people, new places, new conversations. But nothing feels the same. Because what they had with you wasn't manufactured. It was divine. It was real. And they lost it, not because you stopped loving, but because they kept acting like you had no other choice but to stay. But you did have a choice, and you made the hardest one, to choose yourself, to walk away from the illusion that you were less, to stop trying to prove your worth to people who couldn't see it. And now they're left with the echo of that choice, a silence louder than anything you could have ever said. So let them realize it. Let them come to terms with the fact that they needed you all along. Let them feel that ache, because that's not punishment. That's life teaching them what they never learned when they had you. You weren't desperate, you were devoted, you weren't chasing, you were showing up. And now that you're no longer there to hold it all together, the weight of that absence is breaking them from the inside out. You were the constant they thought would never leave, the safe place they didn't respect, the love they thought they could take forever. But now they know not everyone stays, not everyone waits, not everyone keeps knocking on a closed door. You left, and with your departure came a truth they can't run from. They needed you far more than you ever needed. They were comfortable while you were dying inside. There's a kind of pain that doesn't show on the outside. A quiet suffering that hides behind smiles, laughter, and I'm okay. You lived in that pain for far too long. You got so good at pretending that even the ones closest to you couldn't see how broken you were. You carried the relationship. You carried their ego. You carried their emotions, their anger, their silence, their mess, all while bleeding quietly on the inside. And the most haunting part, they were comfortable. While you were dying inside, they were thriving. While you were falling apart behind closed doors, they were sleeping peacefully. You kept the house warm while you froze in your own loneliness. You begged without speaking. You asked for help without words. You hoped they would notice the change in your eyes, the tremble in your voice, the weariness in your soul. But they didn't. Or maybe they did and chose not to care. That's what hurts the most. But someone can watch you drown and still ask why you're not smiling. You stayed up late wondering what more you could give. You replayed every conversation, every moment, every hurt, trying to fix it, trying to make sense of why someone could be so indifferent to your suffering. And they were out laughing, posting, living their life like you didn't exist. Not once did they pause to ask, "Are you okay?" Not once did they say, "I see you, I hear you, I care." And the silence? It was louder than any insult they ever could have spoken. But still you stayed, because you love, because you believe. Because you thought if you held on a little longer, maybe they'd wake up. Maybe they'd see the toll it was taking on your soul, but love doesn't live in one-sided sacrifice. And you finally reach that breaking point, not with anger, not with hate, but with clarity. You realize that your silence, your pain, your slow dying was not love. It was abandonment in disguise. And so you left, quietly, no fights, no long text, no last plea, just silence. You disappeared, and they didn't even notice at first. But oh, how that silence grew. It crept in through the cracks they never bothered to seal. It echoed in the places where your presence used to bring life. And now they feel it. They feel the absence of your spirit, your love, your light. They feel the consequences of their comfort. The realization that while they were relaxed, you were being destroyed. And here's what haunts them now. You never asked for much. Just to be seen, just to be loved back, just to feel like you mattered, but even that was too much for them. And now, they're left with the guilt of not being there, of letting someone as pure, as loyal, as giving as you slip through their fingers. Now they're uncomfortable. Now they're restless. Now they can't sleep. Because the very person they overlooked is the one they can't forget. You were dying inside while they thrived. And that imbalance, that selfishness, that ignorance is what will echo in their soul forever. Because real love doesn't ignore, it doesn't silence. It doesn't sit in comfort while the other person is falling apart. You were not asking for the world. You were just asking not to be invisible. And now your absence makes you unforgettable. They lost the one person who would have stayed through it all, had they just opened their eyes and seen you. And now it's too late, because you're healing, you're rising. And they're haunted by the comfort they chose while you were slowly breaking inside. You left everything, just to find yourself again. Sometimes the most powerful act of self-love is also the most painful. It's not walking into something new, it's walking away from everything familiar, from the people, the patterns, the past, from the very life you built while abandoning your own soul. You see, you didn't just walk away from them. You walked away from who you had to become just to survive with them. You left the version of you that tolerated being unseen. You left the version of you that begged to be chosen. You left the shell of a person you became just to make everyone else feel whole, while you were crumbling quietly, daily, deeply. And that choice, that decision to leave everything, it didn't come easily. It tore at your heart because you loved them. You loved the dream you had with them. You loved the idea that maybe, just maybe, it would all turn around, that they'd finally see you, that they'd finally pour into you the way you poured into them. But love without mutual respect becomes bondage. Hope without effort becomes self-destruction. So you let go, not just of them, but of the entire identity you built around being needed. You finally asked yourself the question you've been avoiding for years: what do I need? And the answer was clear: peace, healing, wholeness, not chaos masked as passion, not loneliness dressed up as independence, not manipulation disguised as love. You needed you, the real you, the one that got buried under their expectations, the one that had dreams before the pain, the one that used to smile without pretending. And to find that version again, you had to do the hardest thing: leave everything. You walked away from the apologies you never got, from the closure you would never receive, from the fantasy you held on to in place of the reality you were dying in. You walked away without a map, without a guarantee, without knowing what came next. And that is courage. That's not weakness. That's not quitting. That's resurrection. That's rebirth. That's you standing up from your own emotional grave and saying, I choose life. And now, as you rebuild yourself in silence, they're the ones falling apart. Because they thought you'd never leave. They thought their hold on you was permanent, but they didn't realize the chains were made of fear. And the moment you chose love over fear, the chains broke, you freed yourself, and now they sit in the same prison they tried to keep you in: regret, pride, and emptiness. You left everything, but you didn't leave empty. You walked away with your soul. You walked away with your dignity. You walked away with a future that no longer required you to beg for scraps. And in doing so, you found yourself again. The real you, the powerful, radiant, unstoppable you. And that is what haunts them now. Not just that you're gone, but that you're glowing, healing, rising. Let them watch. Let them sit in the silence they created, because you didn't leave to prove a point. You left to find your purpose. You didn't leave to hurt them. You left to heal you. And in doing so, you showed them what real strength looks like. The ability to walk away from everything you once thought you needed. just to remember you were the miracle all along. They thought you were replaceable until silence became the loudest sound. There comes a moment in life where your absence screams louder than your presence ever could. You didn't have to curse them out. You didn't need to break down and beg for recognition. You didn't throw a tantrum. You just walked away without a word. No explanation, no closure. And that's what haunts them, because they were so sure, so absolutely confident that you were replaceable, that someone else could do what you did, love like you did, be there like you were. They thought their pride could outlast your silence. But silence has a way of becoming the loudest echo in someone's soul. At first, they pretended not to notice. They filled the space you left with noise, distractions, other people. They laughed louder, posted more, lived recklessly, as if to say, look, I'm fine without you. But deep inside, in the quiet hours, when the phone didn't ring the way it used to, when the messages stopped coming in, when no one else understood them the way you did, that's when it hit. That absence, it became a shadow they couldn't outrun. Because you weren't just someone in their life, you were the calm in their chaos, the voice of reason in their storm, the love they didn't know how to hold on to, until it was too late. See, when you left without a word, it wasn't out of weakness. It was power, controlled, silent, strong. Because walking away doesn't always mean giving up. Sometimes it means finally choosing yourself. Sometimes it means realizing that your worth is not up for negotiation, that your love, your presence, your loyalty, they are gifts, not entitlements. And when people mishandle you long enough, they teach you how to live without them. That's what happened. You didn't leave to punish, you left to protect your peace. But now, the same people who called you too emotional, too much, or too soft are haunted by the silence they once dismissed. Because silence is revealing. It exposes the truth in ways words never could. It shows who cared and who just used you, who listened and who only heard themselves, who fought for you and who only fought with you. And now, without your light, their world feels colder. Without your consistency, everything feels unstable. Without your energy, it's just empty conversation and fake smiles. You see, when you were in their life, they got used to your grace. They got used to your forgiveness, your understanding, your second chances. They took it for granted, thinking it was never ending. But even the most loving soul reaches a breaking point. And when you hit yours, you didn't make a scene. You didn't demand they change. You didn't give an ultimatum. You just left, quietly, completely. And that's what broke them. Because people can argue with words. They can fight back when you scream. But they can't fight silence. They can't argue with absence. They can't control the void. Now every place you touched, every memory you made, every little habit you had, it all lingers. It lives in their mind like a ghost. A presence that can't be seen but can always be felt. They see you in songs, in moments, in conversations that remind them of your heart. And they wonder, why didn't I do more? Why didn't I say something? Why didn't I choose them while I had them? Regret is a quiet punishment, and it plays on repeat, over and over. Because they realize now, you were not just someone passing through. You were a once-in-a-lifetime type of soul. But don't mistake their silence for peace. Don't confuse their smile for healing. You left without a word, and yet your silence became the loudest truth they ever heard. They thought you were replaceable, but they learned the hard way that souls like yours don't come around twice. That love like yours doesn't knock again. You were the lesson, the wake-up call. The one that got away because they weren't ready to grow. And now they're haunted. Not by what you said, but by everything you didn't. Because you leaving wasn't just a moment, it was a message. And every day that passes without you is a reminder that they lost something they'll never find again. A real one, a heart that showed up, a soul that saw them. And now they'll spend the rest of their life listening for a goodbye that already came in silence. Let this be a reminder. Sometimes the strongest move is walking away in silence. Sometimes the most powerful word is the one never spoken. Because healing doesn't always come with explanations. And sometimes closure is simply choosing yourself and letting the silence speak for you. They may never tell you how deeply it hit them. They may never show the tears, the sleepless nights, the endless what-ifs. But trust this, your absence changed them. Your silence echoed through every corner of their pride. So if you've ever had to walk away, if you've ever been forced to choose your peace over their chaos, know this, that was not weakness. That was strength. That was self-respect. That was the voice of your soul finally saying, enough. And whether they admit it or not, your silence is the one conversation they'll never forget. You left without a word, and it haunts them. And maybe that's the justice, not revenge, not bitterness, just silence. Heavy, unforgettable, eternal silence.